Evo, tome možemo krenuti. Možemo krenuti.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, greetings to all and everyone. It's my great privilege and honor to introduce to you Dr. Dražen Brščić, our fellow Croatian co-patriot. Actually, there's an interesting side bit before introducing Dražen, a personal side note coming from me. Dražen was my supervisor on my doctoral thesis, and we met while he was in Rijeka from 2017 to 2019 as a assistant professor at the University of Rijeka technical faculty. And right now, Dražen is an associate professor at Kyoto University in Japan. And Dražen got his doctoral degree in electrical engineering from the University of Tokyo, of course, in Japan. After which he spent 2 years as a postdoctoral researcher at Munich, Germany, and 5 years after that at the ATR Institute in Kyoto, Japan. Those of you who know, I came from Japan back to Croatia in March, 1st of March, where basically I was both as a doctoral student and as a researcher after my postdoc researcher, was working with Dražen and Professor Takayuki Kanda in the field of human-robot interaction with a special focus on moral human-robot interaction. And the title of my project as a fellow of this fellowship under the CAS is robotic bias. So this is the project we are currently working on, researching, conceptualizing approaches to diminishing robotic facilitated discrimination in the public space. So, and that's the last thing I wish to note, is that the specialty of the Kyoto Human-Robot Interaction Lab is the social robot working in a public space. And this is something which is really rarely found, even nowadays, basically in the entire academic and research world. There's only, I think, a few labs working on real-life robotics, predominantly the experiments and the research done on within the human-robot interaction, but more generally with social robots, is predominantly within confined spaces under experiments which are specifically delineated, which basically means you enter into a room and then you converse with a robot, and the experimenter then picks up the results from that. But that's not only the problem with robotic research, that's basically the problem with all kinds of research, right? So that's the specialty of the Kyoto lab. And it's, once again, it's been my great privilege to be able to work with Dražen and to work with him in the future. And here I give the word to him, my dear.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for the nice introduction. I'm quite happy to present here. As Tom just mentioned, I've had roots back there where you are now. And also I worked fairly recently in Rijeka. So yeah, it's nice to be back, but wish it would be not virtual, but in person. But yeah, here we have what we have. Anyway, so Tom already started mentioning the topic, and so basically the title here is Towards Social Robots Working in Public. Probably most of you working on something quite different than this, but yeah, I'm trying. This is kind of, I'm a technical guy. I'm doing engineering. I have an engineering background, but I'll try to keep the talk less technical, and I think the topics are quite close to everyone, so it's going to be easy to follow. So yeah, to start, I already had an introduction from Tom. This is, you can see and you can hear that I basically go to Japan and then go somewhere else and then go to Japan again, and I kind of yeah, already more than 10 years in Japan altogether. So yeah, well, I'm at home kind of here also. I'm also at home in Croatia, but yeah, I have these two homes right now. Yeah, so let me start. I'm starting with a vision here. So what are public spaces, and what do we, how do you think about future in our public spaces? And you can see an illustration here with people around and robots doing various tasks. And our vision basically is that in future there will be robots which are in our daily environments, such as shopping malls, such as public squares, etc. So the robots will be doing various tasks. And then the question is, why do we focus on public spaces? Well, one thing one thing which actually maybe you might really want to see a robot is in your home to do your chores. But so why do we actually do it in public spaces? One reason is that it's easier actually than doing it at home. So which you might think, well, how come there's so many people? But actually homes are quite difficult because each home is very different. Each person is very different. You have to make something nice for a specific person. You have to personalize the robot to that person. And this is actually a very difficult task. It's much easier to do something general in a public space. The second question why we do public spaces is there is a need for robots. And many works which are currently done in public spaces, such as guards, such as maintenance, people working at the reception desk. These kind of jobs are kind of, they belong to this category of dirty, dull, dangerous, difficult jobs, which we would rather that people don't do, and we would rather automate it and give robots to work on that. But still, it's not just, it's a public space, so there's still real space and it's still real people, so it's still a difficult topic. Let me start first with an example, and this is from one research from my colleagues, and this is let's say a successful example of how a robot service would look like. I hope you hear the sound.
行きたい場所に合わせておすすめするね。どこに行くんですか？自動販売機。自動販売機。何これ？自動販売機だね。自動販売機はここからあっちへまっすぐ進んでその先のエスカレーターのところを降りてじゃあそこにあんねんその先のところにあるよあるよあるありがとうありがとうどういたしまして楽しいこれ
As you can see, this is people being very excited by interacting with the robot, and the robot actually being interacting in a nice way, so that people are not scared or surprised by it. And actually, so what do we mean by what do we really need to have such to develop such social robots? Well, one thing which is necessary is to understand people, because these robots don't need to just do a task. They also need to be, well, as the title says, social. And this is social means they have to have some understanding of the people and what the actions and aims are. And I believe you all work at some type of research which connected to understanding people, and you know that this is not a simple task. And so if not for robot to know people is actually quite difficult. Another thing which is important is that this interaction which the robot are doing feels in a natural to people. So it should not be just a technical robot just performing an action. It should the people should feel natural while interacting with it. And the thing is, we were still nowhere near to solve that. And also, for me, who have a technical background, the big thing is that the issues here are not just technical. This is not purely technical questions to say, okay, I will make a robot who will just do a task fast, and this will work fine. It usually just doesn't work fine if you do it like that. So to exemplify this last point, let me start with the one research which was done here also by us, and this is a distribution of pamphlets. If you come to Japan, you will often see people distributing flyers in public spaces, and this can be various shop flyers and other stuff. So the question which we asked here was, can a robot do that? And the easy answer will see, well, yeah, of course, this is easy. I mean, just go towards the person and extend the hand. So when you try to do it like that, it looks like this. People just avoid. They don't get what's going on, or in this second case, they even get scared. They don't understand what the robot is doing. So it turned out it's actually not that easy. It seems like a simple technical implementation. So just go straight and extend the hand, but it's not. It's just not like that. The robot is not very bad at doing pamphlet distribution like this. So the way how we approach this is basically, as I said, we want to understand first. We will start by understanding how people do it, and so we basically observe real distributors of pamphlets. And here on the left, you have an example of a good distributor, and you can see that people are actually taking the flyer from this person. On the right, you have another person doing distribution, and this person is much less successful. On the first look, it looks like they're doing almost the same thing, but there are subtle differences here, and these subtle differences make all the difference. And so what we did was basically model this behavior. We did an experiment. We looked at the videos and also did the experiment in the lab to find a model how the robots actually do this. And to make it long story short, one way to describe what the approach which we came with is to approach it from the side, not directly, but from the side, and extend the hand just in time so that people realize that you're giving them a pamphlet. And you can see how it looks like in this video. So you can see the robot approaching just in time, and the person now actually understanding the intent of the robot, that it's giving the flyer, and actually often they actually took the flyer from the robot. In percentages, you can see it's like a very big difference. Like the naive approach, which used only 1/3 of people were to take the flyer. Here we get up to 73%, so which is almost like the best human. So the very important thing here from this previous example is that it's important to understand how people act in the space. So we cannot just start by simply implementing the robot. It's important to understand how people do it. And one way to achieve that is to basically study the human behavior interaction directly as they happen in such spaces. And this is what I was working specifically a lot in since even my PhD, and then later is tracking of people in public. And the way how we do it is we use some data which looks like this on the left, and you can see here some gray image, and actually this more whiter parts are the parts which are closer to the camera, and more blacker parts are parts which are further from the camera. It's actually, this is not measuring colors like a standard camera would do, it's measuring the distance from the sensor. And we use this type of sensor because it's good for privacy issues. As you can see, it's very hard to understand who is who in this picture. Even if you see an RGB camera, like if you see me here in my camera, it's really easy to understand, to recognize me. But if you see this kind of image, it's very difficult it's much more difficult to recognize. Actually, this person in front this is me. I think this is me, actually. I'm not even sure, even myself anymore. But yeah, this is the reason why we try to use this kind of sensors, and then combine multiple sensors like that in order to get person's position. And we apply this. This is like, this work here is 10 years old already. We apply this in a very, very big area here in Osaka, in Japan. And as you can see, this is 900 square meters area. It's about 100 meters from left to right, and various like a corridor and other areas here. And as you can see here now, the system is tracking all these dots here at people being tracked in real time. And you can see this is here, person is actually being tracked from start to the end of the environment continuously, 100 meters being tracked. We also could take the body orientation to some extent, so you can know where the person is facing the store. We could also take the height of a person. So here there's an example of a child with probably her parents, and they see the height here of the child is much smaller than the one of the parents, which means, yeah, we can actually understand if somebody is a child or not. So this is at that point, this was like the widest area which such tracking possible. And this allowed us to do something like collect really unique data sets of people. We collected data for a whole year, twice a week, from morning to evening. And we had a very huge amount of data of people, and then once you have such a huge data set, you can do stuff like detecting various details of human behavior. We worked a lot on the motion, for example. So, for example, this is just a very illustrative, just an illustrative thing, but the walking direction here is shown. So, for example, the red means the people are walking towards northwest, basically, and the blue would be the people walking towards the southeast. So you can see here, what it is, notice in this image, if you notice the different thing here is that in Japan people walk on the left because they also drive on the left, and as opposed to Croatia or most of the Europe, where people would usually do vice versa. So actually you can see stuff like that directly from the data. Then we did stuff like detecting pedestrian groups, or also modeling the movement of person through the environment. And for example, once you model the movement of the person, we use this concept of subgoals, but these are details. So here this shows an example of this. We have a part of the trajectory which the person passed, and then we can predict what is the most likely trajectory. This red star here, which you can see jumping, is the most likely trajectory that we predicted based on just on this start. And the blue one is what the person actually traveled. So you can see we can get a good estimate of people's future motion just because we collected a lot of data and modeled this kind of behavior. So sure, this is maybe you say it's just movement, so it's not really interesting, but then you can do stuff which actually connects to more social behavior of people. And this is one thing which we worked on is detection of atypical movement. And as I just said, we could predict where the person will be sometime in the future. And you can say, okay, if the person really goes in the position where we predicted it will be, we will say this is a typical person. This is just moving as everybody else does. If the person went to a completely different location where our model never thought it might go, this person is atypical. So, well, who are these atypical people? So what are they? Or how can we even use this information that somebody is moving atypically? We made a work where our assumption is basically people who move atypically are people who potentially need help from the robot. or potentially need some are wondering where they are, or they need to find some place. So that's why they're going in the environment and not moving like everyone else. So you actually implemented this, and you have a robot here in the environment, and you can see it here. The robot is just looking at people, sometimes moving a little bit around, but it doesn't approach to anyone. Actually, this robot is a guide robot, but it doesn't approach to people when they are moving in a way which is expected based on our model. Once somebody comes in the area, and so these people, you see that they stopped in this area, and they kind of the movement didn't match anymore the typical model.
お隣ですか。ATC の道案内やおすすめ情報を話せますよ。遊び回れ。どこに行くんですか。遊び回れ。遊び回れらへん。遊び回れはあのエスカレーターのところを5階に登ってその先のところにあるの。
Yes, as you can see, so the robot would just approach people who really were in need. So this is, you can say, this is very much like a guard would do. So it's not the guard or a guide would not just approach anyone, but they will see, look if somebody looks like if they don't know where they're going or they need some help, then in that case the guard will go and approach the person. So this is such an application which just by having all this data we were able to achieve. Another example also based on modeling people is one problem which we noticed with when you have robot. Robot is still a fairly unusual sight even in Japan. So people gather around it, and you can see here many children around, and also people are looking at it, taking pictures. But what it happens here, there's some people are not really interested in the robot, and what happens is the robot, these people who are around the robot are in the way for other pedestrians. Some people just want to pass here, and there's a bunch of people around, and frankly they're more bothered than anything. So we were wondering how can we now approach this problem, because this involves many people, and it's not something which you can just simply know when will happen. So the way how we approached it is to actually, because we knew how people move through the space, we made a simulation of people's movement. So through all this environment which we gather data from, we could just simulate many people how they will move. So this looks like something like this. You have all these many dots which are actually people moving, and there's one red circle here, which is the robot being here, and the black ones are gathering around it. These are people who are interested in the robot. And in addition, there's this yellow color here, and this shows how much people are bothered by the congestion which is around them. Basically, if they have to pass through narrow passages, we model this as a highly bothering situation. So the thing what you can do from this is you can evaluate this whole situation with many people. You can evaluate how much does it bother people if the robot is there. So it's a very complex situation happening, but we actually can extract just one simple number saying, okay, if the robot is here, this will bother people a lot. And then we basically just try to evaluate how this works. So for example, if you don't use this model, the robot will tend to stand in an area where there are many people passing. But if you actually have it use the model of bothering, then they'll try to stand in a place where there's less people. And then we, through gathering data, we actually managed to prove that there's, managed to prove that this actually improves how people feel about the robot. similar approach for research we used in a very different application, and this is the problem of abuse of robots, and in particular by children. So what I mean by abuse is children, as you may imagine, children are very curious about robots. If they see a robot, they will come running and trying to interact with it. However, this sometimes evolves into what you could basically name abusive behavior. And the way how we define abuse here is, well, there's two parts. One is either persistent, obstructive, or offensive action, or it's actual physical violence. So yes, do children really do that? So yes, they actually do. So as we see in this video, the robot was basically doing a task of patrolling this area, and you would have children just come and they would stand in front of it, and when they do, the robot will say, "Please let me go through. I'm patrolling now." However, in many cases, it would happen that these children would just continue doing this persistently for minutes and just never let the robot go. Sometimes they will also tell bad words to the robot. When this escalates, this would gradually escalate. They will tell bad words. They will do some violent things like pushing, because as you can see in this video. So actually, we realize that this is truly a big problem. So if we want to have a robot, a social robot by itself in a public space, obviously you cannot just always have a person standing there and saying, "Children, please move away." You have to. The robot has to be alone in this space. But what happens is that you have people, or mostly children, but sometimes also other people doing abuse on the robot. And it's not only here in this environment, but also in other places in the US and in Europe, and basically through all the world, people have reported that there is a problem of robot abuse. So again, our approach here was basically, let's try to simulate how people are moving, and let's try to also model how much is the chance, what's the chance that some abuse will happen. And this is it's a very rough simulation, obviously, but what you can see here is some model of a robot and some other child. There's a child next to it, and this number here, which is changing, is the probability that this child will start abuse. Well, this will increase to a point that this becomes abuse. So this is, let's say, 7% here. However, when there's a second child, our model would say, no, now the probability increases significantly. Now is already almost 13% that some abuse will happen. So it's a rough model, of course, but we have a model of how to evaluate is this potentially abusive situation happening. So once you have the model, what you could do is basically try to avoid abuse from happening. So in this case, robot patrolling in the area, there's a child coming close to it. And our model was saying if the child is close to a parent, close to his or her parent, the chance of abuse is getting very low. And so the robot would autonomously, based on this model, it would just move to the parent. We never told him to go to the parent exactly, but that's what happened from the model itself. And so this way we managed to in a way escape basically from getting abuse. Did we really solve the problem? I don't think we really solved the problem. The abuse is still potentially happening, and actually the robot, when it has to avoid abuse, it's prevented from doing its own tasks. So we still don't think we solved this problem. We still have some work, some works in progress on this issue. This abuse problem brings us to the problem of low moral actions, and Tom already mentioned that this morally relevant actions in the space. So abusing the robot is of course not very appropriate, socially appropriate, but there's other actions which can be considered low moral. I don't know, smoking in public spaces, or I don't know, speaking with loud voice, and some or like hitting people would be a very extreme one. Yes, one thing which we worked on is actually to trying to detect these actions. So technically speaking, it's a bit difficult problem because you actually don't have much data on such things. You obviously cannot observe so many people who smoke in the public space, in Japan at least. Maybe more in Croatia. But then we actually developed, after some using some specific technical approaches, we developed a system which can actually, as you can see here, it detects what is currently the person doing. So it's, for example, here is trying to punch the robot, and is kicking the robot, then it's trying to bar the side, trying to block it, then it's using some weapon. You can see this, it works kind of nicely. And so this we would like to use in future to actually not just detect the action of, but also to try to influence the people who are doing such low moral actions to basically to improve our public spaces and use the robots to do that. Okay, and I'm going to switch to the final small research which I wanted to present today, and this is about just doing a robot work which is not particularly social. In a way, it's just working in a public space, and in this case, we looked at robots which just pick the garbage. So it's basically a robot cleaner. And we were wondering, so even though this by itself is not very social action, there's still people who look at the robot, and these people might be influenced by just looking at the robot. And it's actually known when you see people doing some such a basically morally loaded action, which kind of picking garbage or doing something which has a moral effect, then this might have an effect on in average, will have an effect on the people who see it. So, for example, you see someone picking up garbage, then you will not just go and throw the garbage which you had in your hand, but you will kind of be more willing to go a little bit more farther away and put the garbage, this garbage in an actual garbage can. So this is what is known for people. So we were curious what happens with robots. So what we did is basically took videos, and you can see a video of what would be a human cleaner, found a piece of garbage on the floor, put it in the garbage can, and then away. And we did the same basically task with a robot. So this is a type of robot which you still don't see in our environments around. Even in Japan, you don't really see robots which can do manual tasks. So this is even more of motivation for us to try to see what happens if we have such a worker robots in the environment, which have some where the work is actually having some moral value. And this is also a task which we really would like to automate, so because the cleaners, well, it's not a really nice job to be a cleaner. So if the robot can do that, that would be really nice. So, but what about results? So, just one example result here, which is illustrative, is we asked people before and after seeing the video, how willing are they to pick up the piece of garbage which was on the floor. We showed them a picture of a piece of garbage and asked them, how willing are you to pick it up? Then they see the video. Some people seen the video of a human, and some people seen the video of the robot. And then we asked them again, how willing are you to pick up this piece of garbage? And what happens in the humans is actually what's, as I just said in the 2 slides before, is there's this increase of willingness to pick up garbage. So people, just by seeing somebody else picking up garbage, there's not strong, but there is a slight increase in people's willingness to pick up garbage. In the case of robots, this does not exist. People will just basically don't care. it really did not affect them at all. So we think this is more like a warning. Okay, so you could have robot cleaners in the environment. However, this might have some unintended consequences. So this might make basically our environment slightly worse just because we're using robots. And this will just only scratch the surface of this question. So it's just a hint of what might be there, but it's just, this is also ongoing research. So yeah, I will stop here, and thank you very much for listening to me, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
No, you please go ahead. It's fine. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to ask Dražen to kindly give a comment on the, how should we say, the dimension of moral robotics in public spaces. Kind of like, how would you describe the relation between social robots and moral robots? Is it the same thing, or is it simply intermixed, and then you just have to have a different angle of view to delineate between those two? From your own research and perspective, kind of like how you came to the understanding and the importance of morality in robots. I think I never asked you that, so now is the chance.
Maybe there's a reason why I never asked me. As I said, I'm a technical guy, and I'm not good where this kind of defining social issues, let's say, or maybe like a philosophical definition that is what you were aiming for here. But let me try to answer it in my view. So of course, robots in social robots are in a way mixing with people. So of course, there's some sort of moral dimension there, always present, I would say. So there's been many talks about robots, and especially social robots, and how are there moral actors? Should we treat them basically like a human, or should we just treat them like a machine? I'm really not the right person to ask that, but the very salient fact, a very strong thing which you can see when working with robots, is that people do not treat them like a mere machine, like just a pure machine. So they will have a very strong social reaction. So even if you ever come in front of the robot, you will just have this reaction, I kind of want to talk to it, or it's looking at me. It's not as when you stare to your computer. It's different. So just by this reaction, which is very normal to all people, it makes them a very specific entity in our environments, and leaves also a lot of open questions. So which as I said, I'm a technical guy, so I'll solve the technical questions, and somebody will have to address these moral questions too. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. There was a chat.
Marco, go ahead.
Yeah, Marco.
Thanks. Thank you for a really fascinating talk. So extremely interesting. I have a million of questions, but I'll sort of focus on two maybe. Like first would be I was wondering if you had some thoughts about the other uses of the technologies you're developing, in terms of, for instance, some uses which might be somewhat problematic, or maybe not from some other standpoint. I mean, which have this which are loaded in some respects morally or politically, like crowd control in public spaces and surveillance in public spaces and so forth. So this is the first one. And the other one was what you were just talking about, that people don't treat robots, I mean, they treat them somehow like some kind of creature. I mean, that they have, I was fascinated that they all said thank you to the robot after the robot gave them sort of instructions. This is really sort of interesting. I was just thinking, how does this sort of tie in with the last experiment in which the sort of, when they see the human cleaner, they pick up the garbage, and when they see the robot, they do not. So here they, I mean, we could stipulate that they sort of perceive the robot as like a non-human. They do not have this pressure of some kind of low moral pressure to actually do something that the cleaner doesn't have to. So it'd be interesting to see if the same robot that they said thank you to would later pick up the garbage. Would this somehow change their, behavior towards? Would they then pick up the garbage themselves? Like once they had this like interaction in which they essentially gave the robot some kind of semi-personality or something like that. So this is more of a comment, but also.
Yeah, let me start from the second one. So yeah, I think you pointed out a very, very, very important point, which we are also kind of curious about, is that the thing is that the people in this example never really interacted with the robot. They just saw it there doing something. And so this really could be the reason of why they're not treating it as basically in the same, there's this difference of how they perceive it in comparison to a human cleaner. Whether this is really true, we don't really know. We didn't test for that yet. So there's still we should really try something like that. But yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I'll keep you posted. Basically, it's what I can answer now. What was the first
I would
question?
love to know. Yes, please do.
And you had one more question. Sorry, I just.
Yeah, the first one was about the other uses of the technology for some sort of, crowd control or surveillance in public spaces and stuff like that. Like, what do you think about these?
Yes, sure. Of course, we are kind of there with these technologies, which could potentially be used in a not so nice manner. So. Even the social interactions, so the fact that people have this basically social reaction to a robot is already a warning sign that this may be used in a not good way. So this is really, it's really little that we as researchers can do about it, because I mean we can just try and see what will happen, and we can say to people, look, what we can do is to say, look, this might be dangerous to that extent, but then it's up to legislator and ethicists to actually discuss these things in more details. Similar to this point, like surveillance, this surveillance problem is the one reason which I was saying, okay, we actually use this kind of data, which is just the distance. So here in this example here, the blue, the blue parts are closer, then comes the green, and then going to red is the parts which are far. So this is just the distance, and you cannot really recognize this person, even if it was someone you knew. So this makes it difficult to actually surveil people. Really surveil. So in that sense is let's say safer for usage. But there's also one big reason why we don't really use cameras is the ethical committee will not let us do it. They say if you use a camera, you have to go and ask each and every person for permission to do that, which is in a public space is of course not possible. So there is already there are already rules in place which prevent to some extent this sort of let's say surveillance or this sort of unethical behavior or unethical use of such technologies. Of course, you might have heard about examples in let's say big countries, which, well, China, let's be direct. So they have use of they have research of how to detect specific minorities based on cameras, which, if you used cameras in real space, which they do actually, so they do all this kind of surveillance things. Yeah, it's very close to what we are doing, but in our case, we really have to stick below this, let's say, turning into an unethical issue below that level. Yeah, hope that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Emilia has a question.
Hello, hi.
Hi.
I don't really have a question. Just wanted to thank you because it was a very complicated. Your field is very complicated, and you made it easier to understand it also for people who are not expert in this. So I don't have a question, but I really enjoyed your presentation, and I wanted to take the time to say that at least. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for very, very kind words. I mean, the field maybe I mean, the stuff behind may sound complicated, but really the questions which I'm talking about here are kind of very close to each and every one in a way. So I'm really curious, actually, how many people here of you have actually had that experience of interacting with the social robots. So maybe just raise a hand. That can be the virtual hand too. Anybody? Well, Tom, obviously, but probably no one. Yeah, it's still a very it's still a very rare thing. So in Croatia, I don't know where you could see a robot unless you go to a specific university which does this research. But there's not even many places like that in Croatia, so maybe one or two. Even in Japan, I mean, in Japan, just it might be interesting to hear. So there are actually, there is already places where you can see robots, and people gradually getting kind of used to them. They're not very useful robots, but they kind of stand in a shop and then wave to you, and I don't know, children can do a little bit playing with them, and so there is this people getting gradually used to them, but it's still, there is always this social interaction to this basically piece of machinery, and which is interesting. I mean, it's just why first of all, but but also it's an interesting effect. But even never interacting with a robot, I guess you can still imagine this situation. But it's not even just robots. I mean, we all played with dolls. We all interacted with some inanimate, not even machines. It's just piece of material which has maybe eyes and a smile, and we kind of get even sometimes emotionally attached to this piece. So like imagine a nice, very cute plush bear or I don't know, cat, and so it's even just that. It's already making us have a social interaction, and then this actually being able to, I don't know, talk and actually talk in a very nice way. It's really a question which just it's close to every one of us, and yeah, that's why that's why I think this is not. I try to keep this talk very non-technical, but it's really the issues are really I think close to everyone. But anyway, thank you again for the nice words. I just get reminded of this. I don't know if you've seen the movie Her, which is an yeah, it's not even, doesn't even have the body. It's just a talking agent, and people get morally attached to well, not morally, emotionally, very strongly attached to that. Which also brings us back to the thing which Marco mentioned, is this can this be used in a bad way? Definitely, yes. You can see the potential of being misused in many cases. But yeah, our researchers, it's always the problem with this kind of research. So yeah, should we stop this kind of research? I mean, if we don't do it, somebody else will. So so it's a difficult question. Fortunately, nowadays there's a lot of talk in AI and robotics about the importance of ethics and ethical education of the engineers and of the researchers, just to be at least strongly aware of all these issues, because they're really important. Yeah.
Yeah, and if I may, just I think what you said is quite sort of I think it's on point. It's down to a legislator. I mean, it's something that it's a legislative political question much more. I mean, technically, but even I find it really interesting what you said, that you cannot that the legislator can even sort of influence what can you use for research, like not, what you said, you don't use the camera, for instance, and stuff like that. So you can actually influence in some way the research process in a way which will keep it within some kind of ethical boundaries to begin with. So I think that's also really sort of interesting and really sort of advanced approach to this sort of more ethical development of certain technologies. So
yeah, of course. I mean, this the field here, the HRI, the human robot interaction field. Now there's the big conference is also called Human Robot Interaction Conference. And nowadays, there's basically for every paper which is written, people, the reviewers, I'm one of them also, but we always ask, did you actually do an ethical board review of this paper? Because people just recognize that this has to be done in an ethical way. Sometimes you have papers which just done horrible from our perspective, like I've seen a paper which they let the children play with the robot without any safety. It was in a, let's say, not typically research strong country. And so it was done in a way which you would ask, did they even ask themselves about, is this proper thing to do? So yes, I think it's very important to keep an eye on this. And cameras are a very old example, let's say. So the people have been using cameras for many years and taking data with cameras. So of course, legislation, which is typically a very slow process to catch up, is for cameras is already there. Yes, so at least to some points, of course. But then, yes, and for other things, legislation is always the final way to go, but it takes time also. And during this process, for us researchers, is there to maybe to find the boundaries there. So if some research goes into something which, I mean, we could try doing something. For example, one thing which people do with robots is, can robots persuade people? So if robots can persuade people, and which you actually show that this is doable, or maybe have some good techniques of how to do it, then the question is, well, should this be legislated? Then probably yes, at some point. I mean, the robots currently are not that good at anything. And people sometimes worry about robot apocalypse and robots coming, raising and killing us all. But this is so much far away. Coming from a roboticist like me, this is laughable, because I spend most of my time doing something like is the picture? Like this, digging through the robot's internals and swearing how stupid this robot is, because it usually doesn't work at all most of the time, and sometimes it just starts working the way how you want it, but this is so far away from, I don't know, a Terminator or something like that. So yeah, but basically still what you can notice is stuff which, well, how gullible can people be sometimes in front of robots. And yeah, wherever people are too gullible, then probably you need something to prevent that.
So if there are no further questions, let me see, none. I would like to wholeheartedly thank Dražen for giving us not only a lecture, but also research insight from one of the premier places in the world where social robotics in the public space are being experimented on. And I hope sincerely that this has at least somewhat brought you the theme a bit closer for your personal understanding. And my final note before we leave is that, as always, research in all things is probably a couple of years, if not a decade, in advance than the current state of affairs in the real world. But that's how it goes, right? It's simply the matter we should do things, at least in this relation between research and real world operations. My thought, I would just have a final note, my thought on what Dražen said on kind of like, if we don't do it, who will do it, right? So we ought to go first. It's actually, I was kind of thought immediately of the nuclear bomb, the way it was developed, right? So it was always a race. And I can't say how much you're familiar with the legislatives and the national and international developments on AI, but just a short glimpse. Already right now in Europe, we are coming from Europe, but globally there is a race, a global AI race. And the United States have officially confirmed that their main, I wouldn't say an enemy, although in some documents that you may find similar terms to that one, is China, right? So there's a huge AI race with the big competitor, the main competitor of China, so US versus China. And there are three basic elements, which are the resources, so human resource, right, talents, then the data and the raw computational power. So what it means actually is that we are, although it's highly humanistic to have researchers who are working on social robots and moral robots, the raw reality is that things always go sideways, right? At least in some accord and in some manner. So in that sense, it's extremely important that research, which is done by Dražen and colleagues in Kyoto and all over the world, is being done, right? So this is nothing we should be afraid of. And this is also, I'm seeing all of this simply to call, right? It's kind of like a pamphlet on my side. In the end, I'm that robot which is giving the pamphlet right now. And the pamphlet is, please work on these things. Because as Dražen has said, there's a huge demand. For instance, within the field of HRI, which is human-robot interaction, there's only a handful of ethical, moral experts working on these themes. I'm not one of them, okay? So you may put me aside, I'm surely not one of them. There's only a handful of people. Perhaps maybe, I don't know, 5 people I could count now, or at least 3 of them, which are really top-level experts, researchers working on these things. So it's infinitesimal almost, right? And things are simply progressing onward. So in a way, what Dražen was saying, kind of like pulling apart the robot's intestines may be a good thing, right? Because the technology is still not so much developed that we should be fearful of social robots. Moreover, so we should be trying to find ways to amend them into our social lives as far as possible, because they can really do wonders, you know, if we apply them correctly. So that's, thank you, a big thank you, and big privilege and honor for me as well to being able to be part of Dražen's friendship and work and the entire Kyoto team. And I hope you all learned something here. Thank you.
Thanks again for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Dražen. Thank you, Tom, and thanks everybody, and have a lovely summer. and hope to see you soon.
Yes.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Thank you, Dražen, and hope we'll have a chance to see each other in Rijeka and
Yes.
hopefully.
further also. Take care.
Bye bye.
Love you. Ciao.